What inspired you to write your story? I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. It's Sam with another live video for you, a relatively short one. Um, Today, I just, not a drawn out author interview like I have sometimes. Happy Friday to everyone out there. Some of you might have noticed I'm on a little earlier than usual, which is okay. I have family visiting in town, and they're actually visiting because it's my birthday in a few days, so I'm looking forward to that. But just with people visiting and different schedules and stuff, I'm getting in my social media, my posting and stuff wherever I can. So here we are. It's Friday. Hope everyone's doing well. I actually have want to talk today about something that's I have a few topics in my mind that are tentatively that are like tenuously related. They're not like super closely related. But when I thought about in my mind what I wanted to talk about, I was like, oh yeah, I better do this one first, one kind of leads into another. So they're not all directly related, but it's just anyway, you'll see. So if you want, you can call this part 1 of 3, and I hope to follow up on the rest in the next couple of Fridays. But I want to talk today about what inspired your story, not necessarily like your life experiences or anything. Although obviously that's important for all of us, but like specifically what works of fiction, whether books or movies or anything else, what great works of fiction that you have read or watched or consumed have inspired you to write your story, whether consciously or unconsciously, because we all have influences, whether we realize it or not. I think as writers and readers, many of us are at least somewhat aware of them, but you may not be. It's okay. And if you've watched any of my videos and the interviews I do sometimes, I always ask the writers this, like what, I mean, I ask them for some of their favorites, like the ones that made them want to write to begin with, but then I ask, like, for this specific story, like, is there any one work or one author or one story that you were kind of that you would say inspired you or that you're drawing from? And sometimes I have an answer, sometimes I have more than one answer because um, most works of fiction are not like completely, or they shouldn't be, complete carbon copies of other works. I mean, we all draw on the things we've seen and heard, certainly, but and they say there's nothing new under the sun, but we combine old things in new ways, and we make something that seems new enough for the audiences. So that's the idea. So I want to ask you what inspired your story, because if you're not aware, or even if you are aware of what it is, it's good to be aware of that, and just to, I guess, to know how you can capture the best parts of that story, and emulate them maybe without making it a total ripoff. I mean, obviously, none of us want to be a total ripoff unless you're writing like a parody intentionally, or something that's like very deliberately an homage. But other than that, I know none of us want to be like a total ripoff, but we do say things like, "I wish I could write something like that," or "I want to be the next blank," or like the next big thing in this genre. And to do that, you're consciously or unconsciously, you're saying you're trying to write something like X. Like, if it's fantasy, probably if it's fantasy, people almost always list Tolkien and or Lewis. If it's action or sci-fi or a different genre, there's lots of different things people could list. But what inspired your story? How can you emulate it well, but also not copy it completely or not rip it off? That's kind of the question for today. So let me give you my answer today. Fractured Heroes, as you guys know, when I went to superhero story, I intentionally wore this Avengers t-shirt that is honestly too small for me now because it makes me happy and I like to talk about superheroes. But I've loved superheroes and comics and superhero movies and shows since I was little. I probably talked about that before. So in many ways, the story is just my love letter to all of Marvel and DC, which is, obviously still, those are publishers, not individual works, but like, and I mean, I could tell you which characters are my favorites and which ones kind of subtly or not so subtly inspired the characters that I'm writing about. Spider-Man is one of my favorites, and I have a character who's a lot like Spider-Man, although honestly I based him on myself, and I think I kind of think I'm like Spider-Man, but then everyone thinks they're like Spider-Man because he's so relatable. But anyway, that's a tangent. I could tell you which individual heroes inspired some of my characters, but there was one main story that inspired not just the characters, but the idea for the story. And I've shared about this in a blog post in written form before, but that one I would have to say, and I don't have a copy here to show you. I think I used to have a copy, but I lost mine. The main work I'd say that inspired me to write this kind of story was Watchmen by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, the 1985 to 86 classic that some people call one of the best graphic novels of all time. If you're not familiar, you can go out and read it, and you get it out of your library. Or that there was a movie that came out in 2009 that I think was, they changed some things, but it mostly followed the story from the comics until the end-ish. But and there was a show that came out on HBO Max a few years ago, a miniseries that was meant to be not an adaptation but a sequel. So anyway, if you're not familiar and you want to go check it out, you can. I hope my descriptions in the next few minutes will help you know whether the story is for you or not, because it's not for everyone. If it's not for you, that's fine. But I read Watchmen for the first time in 2010 when I was in college, and I had some comic book friends who were into it, and I was like, I've read all the main, big, the famous characters like Superman and Batman and Spider-Man, obviously, and the mainstream Marvel and DC. And Watchmen is published by DC, but it was like a separate universe. It was, well, until recently in the comics, it was not connected to the rest of the DC universe. So I hadn't read it. I read it in 2010 and really liked it, but also gave me pause in a lot of ways. And so basically, they have it's an ensemble cast of characters who are broken and flawed, and whether it's morally or psychologically or both. There's Rorschach, who's a dark, brutal vigilante, a la the Punisher. There's Dr. Manhattan, who's like this almost godlike being who's detached from humanity, and there's a few other characters. Minor spoilers, but it's been out for a while. One of the heroes, or one of the characters who you think is a hero at first, ends up being the villain, or at least many of us would call him a villain at the end. So there's a lot of moral ambiguity, there's a lot of brokenness, and it's very well written, but it's a bleak story with a bleak worldview and some brutal and just hard to read and sometimes disturbing characters because that's kind of how the author saw the world. And I was like, this is really good. And there's a lot of good stuff in here. And kind of the idea of an ensemble cast with broken, flawed characters kind of stirred in my mind. So that's what I tried to do with mine, whether consciously or unconsciously. I mean, I'm telling you now about it, how I was inspired. So I guess you could say consciously. I mean, I didn't set out to say I'm going to write the next Watchmen, but just those ideas kind of started forming in my mind. But I included my story one element that, in my opinion, Alan Moore left out, and that was what I'd call hope. His worldview is very bleak, and I mean, if you have a story like that, and that's what you think the world is about, and that's the story you think to tell, then go be honest about your experiences. But I believe in hope, and I believe in healing, and I believe, yes, the world is very dark, and yes, there's much hurt and much pain and evil in the world, and yet I believe in hope and healing. So I was like, I want to write a story like that with with believable, flawed characters in a broken world, but I want to offer hope, because that's what I do. That's what I believe in. So I started thinking of that for my story, and I was like, I have these characters in mind. I have these character ideals, and they're all most of them are broken. Most of them are flawed in some way. I mean, you've heard me talk about them before. There's a character who is beat up, is I guess burdened by guilt over his past mistakes and can't believe in himself. There's a character who's angry and bitter about her parents and her past. I do have a dark vigilante character also, so and a character who struggles with angry outbursts and things like that. So I'm like, I have these dark characters, or at least flawed characters, but I want to offer hope and healing. So I know I'm out of almost at time. I can talk about this longer, but that was kind of how I did it. I wanted to emulate what I thought were some of the best parts of Watchmen, and include its premise. But I'm like, my solution or my conclusion or whatever, my overall worldview will be different. So I'm offering hope and healing, rather than just a bleak worldview. So if that's helpful to you, I hope it is. That's one way you can think about just emulating a good work of literature without copying it completely, is take the best parts of it, but then do something different or give it a different conclusion. Next week, I want to talk more about worldview, and I'm putting that in our writing, and how to do that without being overly preachy. That's kind of my tenuous connection to topics. So next week, Friday the 9th, hopefully talking more about worldview. For now, have a great weekend. Keep writing. Think about what inspired your story and what you can do with that and with that knowledge. And keep writing, and have a great weekend. Bye.